So hello, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. Welcome to another edition of Half Hour on the Hill. I've taken a bit of a break from having the show, but we're back, 2015. And I'm very honored to have today Natalicia Tracy, Executive Director of the Brazilian Workers Center. So Natalicia, thank you so much for coming on Acton TV to have the chance to talk about your work. And as you know, I'm an incredible admirer of yours. We work very closely together on a whole host of issues that affect workers and the immigrant community. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, I thank you. Thank you for inviting me here to speak about the work that we're doing with our community. And thank you also for everything that you do every day for our community.
Well, it's my pleasure. And we've had some progress and some victories over the past couple of years up at the State House. And I really think that's in large part due to the Brazilian Workers Center. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about all the things that the Brazilian Workers Center does, and probably a little bit of a focusing on domestic workers legislation.
Absolutely. First of all, I would like to say that we have been in a community for 20 years, and the center was created by a group of workers who are seeking opportunity to organize and advocate for their own rights. So that's how the center started in the first place. So our mission is really to advocate, organize, and educate community on social, economic, and political issues. So it's a space that you see from working on policy work to research to education, ESOL program, and so on. So, and we also see on average about 5,000 people at the center.
Wow.
And but we also take to the community where we see another 8,000 to 10,000 through community cultural events, community health fairs, and any other type of community event that is happening. Usually we are there with a table, an information table.
And I would definitely second that, because I see you all over social media at fairs and community events across the state and, dare I say, across the country.
I guess so. We have grown somewhat, right? So we have an office in Boston, which is our original location, and we grown to have an office in Hyannis and one in Bridgeport. So, our programs on the other offices, it's still sort of in through the pilot phase, more like in still planting the seeds and building relationships, but clear enough there's a need for it as well.
And that means that a constituent of mine in the Metro West area could take advantage or reach out to the center to ask for support or help.
Oh, absolutely. So at the center, first of all, we do workers' rights. Under the umbrella of workers' rights, we deal with wage theft, we deal with overtime violation, we deal with workers' compensation and discrimination at the workplace. And in order to do that work, we partner with the Attorney General's Office and the U.S. Department of Labor and OSHA. We actually have a formal alliance with OSHA.
Excellent.
Where you facilitate for us to have more direct access with them and support them on some of the work that they do in our community, but also make them more accessible to many members of our community as well. So that's one part of it.
And if I could add, you say workers' rights, so I think sometimes there are people out there wondering, well, I work somewhere, I generally, things seem okay with where I work. What are the problems that workers are experiencing in certain industries or certain areas of employment?
It is very prevalent in some industries. There are a lot more violations than others. Like, for example, the restaurant industry there are a lot of problems. The domestic workers as well, if you're a nanny or you are supporting elderly with more independent living, and if you clean homes, there are lots of violations. And of course, in constructions, we see a lot in the building trades as well.
And what recourse do people have? What rights do people have to invoke?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that, everyone in this country that work has the right to get paid, right? So if you're
Absolutely.
here, the labor laws it covers everyone. And of course it has to. Otherwise, we would create underground economy and would create a lot more problems. So if you work, you have the right to get paid. And every company must to follow their own policy to cover all workers equally. It doesn't matter where they came from. It doesn't matter if they have limited English proficiency. Everyone needs to be treated the same. That's what the state and the federal laws call for. So, and sometimes workers, they don't know that. That's one of the main issues that we do at the center is making sure they understand that you are a worker and a worker is a worker. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, if you've been in this country, 3 generations, or if you're first generation.
Absolutely. And so, obviously, there were problems with people not being able. They weren't being properly treated. They didn't have the ability to redress their grievances when they weren't being paid or mistreated. Could you talk a bit about the Domestic Workers' Rights Bill and how that improved things for workers?
Yeah, that's a good example. First of all, we have this shining, incredible, very progressive, comprehensive Domestic Worker Bill of Rights in the state of Massachusetts that passed last June 2014. And I want to thank you again for your leadership and championing this bill. It was very important, making Massachusetts the 4th state in the country to pass this bill, right? So after New York, California, and Hawaii. And this bill called for some very basic workers' rights that workers didn't have yet, which is the right to get paid for the time you work, the right to a break, protection against labor trafficking, protection against sexual harassment and discrimination. Some of rights that some of us take for granted, right? But for domestic workers, they're crucial, especially because they were intentionally excluded from the National Labor Relations Act in the 1930s and few other policies along the way. So they didn't carry those basic rights. So we gained them in Massachusetts. So it's an industry that that has been deregulated for a very long time, and it's about making it into a job. People need to think about as being a job. Massachusetts depends on about 100,000 domestic workers every day, for families who have to go out and work, doctors, professors, senators.
White-collar professionals.
Right, all the white-collar professionals, right? And some single mom that needs to make a living too, that may have a elderly parent at home that needs some extra support. So all those people being supported by domestic workers, yet they were excluded from labor protections. So we gained that, and right now we're doing enforcement. And a lot of the issues that we see within the profession is a lot it has to do with not getting paid at all, or getting paid half of what minimum wage is supposed to be, not getting paid for all the work that they do, having time to come in and not time to time to start and not time to finish.
Right.
Not even understand what are the full obligations, having a job description.
The responsibility,
right?
sure.
Or it's just one after another. Can you do this? Can you do that? And so that's another regulation too. It's really creating job description. And another important one is notice of termination. When you are a domestic worker and you live in someone's home and you get fired without cause just because you're no longer needed, you're homeless. So there's notice of termination now, which is really important.
And the law passed last year, and now regulation has been promulgated by the Attorney General?
Yes, the Attorney General's office now, and also the Mass Commission Against Discrimination is responsible for enforcement, of course, along with the community.
Right.
We're going to clearly work very closely to ensure that workers will learn about their new rights, and the employers will also learn about their new responsibilities. And I just want to say something about employers.
Sure.
Because I think we had a lot of employers supporting the campaign, and I want to make it clear that employers are not they're not bad. It's just that there were no regulations. There were no right thing to do. It was just the way things were done then, and people just kept doing it, right?
Right, at a custom.
Yeah,
right.
so this is an opportunity to really get to know a lot of good employers and teach and talk to them about the new regulations. And I'm sure most of them are going to want to do the right thing by their workers because that's the closest thing that they have to home, right?
Absolutely. And I think it improves economic security for people across the state.
There's less job turnover, right? It's clear there's less misunderstanding at the workplace because you come in with a clear understanding of what are your responsibilities, your working hours, how much you're going to get paid. So reduce that gray, confusing area that you don't know, your responsibilities and the employer is not sure what to expect from you or so on. So I think we'll absolutely be helping the industry.
And now the Mass Commission Against Discrimination, the AG's office, they're taking action. There's being complaints filed, and
yes,
that's excellent.
Yes, they are on board, and they also doing education. Another very incredible piece of the bill is that there is a provision that mandates that the Attorney General's office and the Mass Commission Against Discrimination actually work on outreach and document cases during the next year to really show, a profile of the issues so we can work on them more effectively.
That's terrific. No, thank you for explaining the bill and its purpose and the impact it's having. And we're actually going to take a break right now, and when we get back, talk about the broader Brazilian community, which is very large in the district that I represent.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
So welcome back to the second half of Half Hour on the Hill. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and we have today discussing a whole host of issues. Natalicia Tracy, the Executive Director of the Brazilian Workers Center. And Natalicia, we talked a bit about the work of Brazilian Workers Center and specifically the Domestic Workers' Rights Bill. I'm wondering if you could talk more broadly about all the other services that the Brazilian Workers Center provides, and also sort of what you're seeing in the Brazilian American community in general in Massachusetts.
Yes. In addition to working on policy work such as Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, Safe Driving Bill, Trust Act, we also have safety and health trainings at the center for workers that they call hard to reach workers. In Portuguese, in Spanish, and in English. And we also have a brand new training for domestic workers that came out of the survey of 200 workers that we learned that only about 10% of them use protection at the workplace and understand, how to protect themselves against bloodborne pathogens and other issues at the workplace. So that's a new training. We also have the ESOL for Social Justice, where the students come to the center 4 nights a week, and it's 7 to 9:30 to accommodate their work schedule.
Sure. Yeah.
And the ESOL for Social Justice, English as a second language for social justice, it has components of workers' rights, immigrants' rights, tenants' rights, and workers' compensation. That way they are not just learning English, but they also understanding how society works. And now we also adding a racial justice component to all our programs.
That's excellent.
Because when we talk about the Brazilian community, it's sort of a new community in some ways. As you know, there were 2 waves, and they mainly started coming in 1985 right after Brazil became a free you know,
Democracy
a
again, yeah.
democracy, and the middle class was fleeing the hyperinflation that was happening. So most of them were middle upper class, right? That came to maintain the middle class status, and then we had the second wave of workers, people from the community, simple community, that were in search of better life for their families, right? So a lot of people from small towns, different part of Brazil, especially Minas Gerais.
Right.
All the social surveys shows that about 60% of
Wow.
the Brazilian population are from somewhere in the state of Minas Gerais.
Wow.
And then the other percentages breakdown is São Paulo, Rio, and few of these states for the south, and of course Bahia and Goiânia are the states that we've seen a lot of people too. And they tend to really try to keep a low profile. Most of them are here to work,
Right.
to provide for their families here or their families in Brazil, such as their mom, their dads, and sometimes they leave children and spouses behind, which I think is a different model of U.S., like the idea of family, you know, it's a little bit different. So everyone is family, right? And
Exactly.
you worry about your brothers and sisters and your mom and your dad's well-being in a way that you support them. You feel obligated to support them, especially because you have more resources here. So,
And I would just note that this area, especially the Marlborough area that I represent, has a large Brazilian American community, and I think Metro West is one of the
Yes.
largest Brazilian American populations in the entire country.
That's right. They've been here between 15, a lot between 10 and 25 years, some up to 30 years right now. I've been here 25 years. And I think another part of the Brazilian community that I feel that is missing right now, it's more participation in political, civic engagement, more of that, understand more the role that they can play. Many of them, actually, Brazilians are the fastest growing group of immigrants that are becoming U.S. citizens of all the other groups.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, and I think last year about 37,000 Brazilians or so were identified as U.S. citizens that could be doing more work to support the work that you do.
Absolutely. And if I may ask, I mean, are some of the barriers just that people are so busy working and providing for their families that they don't have time to organize or participate, or do you think there are other challenges?
I think one main challenge is not time. I think is understanding of the process.
Okay.
And it's very different from Brazil. Brazil is completely hands-off. You do not have access. You do not interfere. You vote.
With government, with politicians.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
You are obligated to vote. In some ways, you are, I have to say that. Because if you don't vote, you can't obtain some documents like travel documents and so on. So you must vote. But you are not absolutely involved at all. And I think here, they don't understand that you can participate, that you can have a voice, that you can make a difference. So there's so much more work that we need to do in that area.
Absolutely. You're a leader in the Brazilian community and broader on so many important work issues. I would say not only in Massachusetts, but in the country. You're doing tremendous work. I'm just wondering are you seeing other members of the Brazilian American community that are stepping up to be leaders and organize on other issues?
Yes, there's been lots of conversation in different levels at the community about the importance of participation, of engaging and understanding, playing a role in a community that you live in, not just socially, but economically, but also politically. And few people have stepped up to try to run for city councils.
Yes.
There are people trying step by step. But one thing that we at the center are doing next year, very intentionally, we are going to start a new project called We Matter, We Vote.
Excellent.
That has a education component, a civic education component, understand how the legislature system works here, and how, let's go meet your senator, let's go
Sure,
meet your
sure.
House of Representative, and that's going to be part of the ESOL program too. In our day of visit, voters registration. Why not register to vote? It's such a privilege to be able to vote. So conversations like that within the community, so they understand how we can shift the political landscape if we participate. It's a very important year next year with the presidential election
Exactly.
of 2016.
And I would say that's so important too, because one of the conversations I have a lot with the constituents I represent who are Brazilian is asking about the Safe Driving Act.
That's right.
And explaining that you need to reach out to your legislator, tell your story and
Yes.
explain the difference that will make in your lives. And
Yes.
so that's excellent that the Brazilian Workers Center is doing this initiative.
Yes, and I explained to them, and we're going to continue to do that work. You have representation no matter what, but if you vote and if you participate and you go talk to your senator or your House of Representative and you supported him and you understand what he stands for, it's completely different conversation that we'll be having with them. And you feel really empowered too, you're not just an outsider, you really feel a sense of belonging. And I think that's one piece of the work that we're missing in our community.
Absolutely. And so there are different movements and initiatives going on
Yes.
right now. I think I've seen you at some of the Fight for 15
Yes.
efforts for a living
Yeah.
wage.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a very hot issue for many, many workers across Massachusetts.
Yes, the Fight for 15, there is this big group called Wage Action that are involved, organized labor and community worker centers that are working on this campaign that we all deserve 15. It's very inclusive campaign that is everyone, no one should be making less than $15 an hour. And so there are actions once a month, on the 15th they tend to be most of the time. And we support each other on different issues to ensure that no matter where you work, you should be making $15 an hour, because if you are not making enough to provide for your family.
That's terrific. And so there's a bill pending in the legislature
Yes.
that I think that was just reported out of
That's
committee.
right, that's right.
And this is for fast food restaurants
Yeah.
and other large businesses?
That's
or?
right. So if you have 500 or more, I think, employees, you don't pay 15, you have to pay back like $1 in fine for each one of them or something like that. There's a big fine to encourage big companies to fess up, because they can afford. They're making plenty of profit. It's not
Right.
like they're hurting, right? To actually pay workers a fair pay.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the Brazilian Workers Center is created a racial justice program, and clearly we're seeing across the country protests as well as the outrageous treatment of many people of
Yes,
color,
of color.
especially
Yeah.
the Black American or Black communities.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your program is hoping to work on and
Yeah.
connect with other people of color.
Well, first of all, we are already part of a national project sponsored by Ford Foundation and the Institute for Policy in Washington, D.C. that is called, there's two pieces of it. One is called And Still I Rise, which is Black leader women in the labor movement. And there's
Excellent.
another report called Black Workers Matter that will give a profile of working conditions for people of color in this country. And part of that project is to really shed some light into the issues, and the inequality that exists that is based on race and color. Another conversation we have at the center, that a lot of us coming from Brazil and a lot of the immigrants here in the U.S. and in Massachusetts are people of color. And it's not by accident that we suffer so many discrimination and exploitation and marginalization. It's not just because we're immigrant, and there's a lot more to it. And it's unfortunately part of the history of this country, and we have to change that. We have to change this culture.
Absolutely.
and
Institutional racism.
That's
Absolutely.
right. We have to break through this cycle, and that's part of the work that we're doing, is to really educate people. And Brazilians need that too. As you know, Brazil, we don't talk much about color. It's about class. Everything in
Okay.
Brazil is about class. It's changing now. But people coming in with really blind spot on race relations and race issues, that it's important that we break out of that as well.
So you're seeing more consciousness amongst Brazilian Americans?
Yes.
Is that more often the case for the second generation, so those who were born in the U.S. to parents who grew up in Brazil, or?
You know, it's mixed.
Okay.
I think that when you grow up here, you hear the conversation, you see the issues, and as you know, get older here and you get used to the culture, your lenses change as well. You begin to see, you have more access to education, information, and not even talk. You know, you're talking about those issues. So it's not like you can just ignore them and pretend they don't exist, because they right out here in the opening. And I think for that reason, more and more, the community is becoming more aware of it. And we're going to work together to actually, you know, reduce the gap between immigrants of color and African Americans. And another piece that we've been saying is that, guess what? A lot of the new generations of immigrants of color, they are becoming African Americans, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the process. So if you're not white, eventually you're African American. So why don't we do the work so we can create a better world for all of us?
Well, that's excellent, and I think we reached the end of the show, but I just want to say I can't thank you enough for working on so many issues that impact not only immigrant community but people across the state. I'm such an admirer of all the great work that you do, and thanks so much for joining me today.
No, thank you. We are really extremely honored and appreciative for all you do. We need to clone you and have many of you inside of the State House, because you're one of a kind, and we are very lucky to have you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. So yeah, thanks for joining us for the most recent edition of Half Hour on the Hill. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and look forward to future shows. Thanks for joining us.